Chassis painted, it's dry, it's ready for assembly. But I've got all these parts over here that I've got fresh wet paint on to get the chassis assembly and everything going. But in the meantime, what we could be doing, I've got my upper and lower control arms for this setup, and these have still got the original bushings in them. I've got new bushings to go in them, and I want to show y'all, I'm going to plate these ends. I'm not going to plate the whole thing, we're going to talk about why, but we're going to plate these ends and then we're going to replace these bushings. I want to show y'all how I'm going to do this. Y'all stick around. Alright, so here's what we're working with. I've got my lower control arms, and I've got my upper control arms. Now the chassis we're working with is from a 1973 Pontiac Le Mans donor car. So that's a 1973 to 1977 GM intermediate size frame. That particular frame has a lower control arm that's a little bit longer than what a G-frame metric would be. This lower control arm is like 22 3/8 center to center, whereas a metric I think is maybe like 20 1/2, something like that, center to center. All right, but I will tell you this. I've noticed these lower control arms to me are a little bit beefier than what the metrics are as well. This rolled lip right here, the way it rolls up and the thickness of this steel, they're a little bit heavier, a little bit beefier than what the metric is. Other than that and the length, I can't tell much difference. Now, as far as the uppers go, they are identical. The uppers on GM frames, like from all the way from the Chevelles in the late 60s all the way up through the metrics, they're all the same and everything. So I want to show you here, I've already put this washer, this is where it actually goes over the rear end. And this washer is in place, and the reason for the washer here is because we have adjusted this hole. Crate Racing USA Street Stock rules allow me to adjust the length of these by up to a 1/2 inch. I opted to adjust it here at this hole with a weld over washer. This is the place to do it. Everywhere else is a bushing. You'd have to cut the actual control arm to make a length adjustment. So I did it right here, made the adjustment so that I could set my pinion angle to 4 degrees. And so that's the reason for the washer. So there's no bushing goes in here. The bushing on this end is on the rear end. And we'll show that in another video. Remember, follow us on our street stock build for the channel if you're not. All right, the parts that we're going to use, we've got some coupons that are cut out 14 gauge steel that I've already done here. All right, so I've got some 14 gauge pieces of steel. These two long ones right here are going to go on the uppers. All right, and then I've got 8 pieces that are going to go on the lowers, and that'll make sense. Like I said, this is all just 14 gauge steel. I don't want real big, heavy, beefy. And I decided I don't want to plate these control arms all the way down their length. All right, so what we're doing here on these uppers, we're just wrapping over this end right here. On these lowers here, we're doing the same thing. We're going to go across this end and across. And the way I did it, because the uppers, I'm actually going to curl it over across that. So I used one long piece. And on the lowers, it's more of a sharp angle and everything. So I opted to go with 2 separate pieces, one here, and then put a joint in it. Now, what am I trying to accomplish here? Well, the one place that these are gonna fail, possibly from just fatigue and wear over time, is this steel right across here will start getting stretched out. And this bushing will become loose. It'll start moving around and it'll walk and stretch. Now don't get me wrong, if we get in a serious wreck, it will rip this bushing right out of the end of the control arm. I didn't opt to plate the entire thing. Here's my thought process going on right here, okay? I got a 9-inch floater forward rear end. I've got a chassis that has all of my mount points have been reinforced and beefed up. Something has to fail, all right? So let's say, for example, that I catch an entry or exit concrete wall with one of my rear tires, or I have something that is a significant sudden stop. That rear end is going to move, compared to my frame. Where do I want that failure to happen? Well, ultimately, I would want these control arms to fail before I rip the mount's loose on my rear end, the mount's loose on my chassis. You know, this is what I want to fail, because this is a part that I can go to the junkyard and find. I can order another one. You know, it's lots of rear clips that are still out there because, you know, modified's being built. They cut the front clips off, they save all this stuff and they sell it online. You know, so what do I want to fail? I want this to fail. And for that reason, we're only going to plate them to the point that we're going to stop a fatigue wear from happening that is going to make this egg out over time, you know, and this bushing start getting loose. Push comes to shove, I want this thing to rip apart before it rips the car apart. All right, so that's the logic going on there. One more thing. The bushings that are in these right now, these are the old original bushings that were in the car when it was run on the street. I've left these in here for a very specific reason. Here's the new ones. I'm keeping these in the freezer right now, okay? So we are gonna change them out. When we weld this up, we want it to have a bushing in it, because we are going to be very near to where this seat joint is around for this bushing. If I didn't have this bushing in here, all of this is gonna get really hot while I weld it. It's gonna move, it's gonna twist, it's gonna shrink, it's gonna expand, it's gonna be a lot of stuff going on with it. We want this bushing to be in here, wicking the heat away, soaking it up, holding it in its correct location while I do it. Important point here, most important point of this video. When I do this, it ruins this bushing. That's gonna superheat the steel sleeve that the rubber is adhered to, and it's gonna separate. So the rubber is no longer gonna be contacting with the steel inside of the bushing. If I tried to race this bushing, it would fail, and it would fail very quickly. So we're building this with a bad bushing in it, an old wore out bushing. When we put the plating on and everything, it's gonna make it a lot easier for us to drive this out without distorting the end of this as well. All right, let's do one. Here we go. Got my little piece of 14 gauge steel here. Got my end. I've already ground this to make sure that both the ridges were the same. These things are not very accurate the way they're made, and so if one ridge is sticking up higher than the other, it would make your top plate that you put on there be twisted over. So make sure you get those even. All right. And this is not hard at all. The hard part's getting the bushings in and out, but this part's not hard. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna just line it up. Make sure it's pointing in the right direction, and just roll it back into contact on that end. All right, okay, so got it good and straight. Now if it gets off a little bit, you can work with it with a hammer. It'll make it gap up on one side if you have to twist on it, so if I have to start knocking on it sideways. But all we're going to do is just push it over. Good. I'm going to put a little spot right here where this corner crook is. And right there. Because it would spring up as I bend it over if I didn't. It's off just a little bit. I'm trying to do that. Roll it up here. All right. And then I'll just hold it down while I spot that corner right there. There we go. And that should let me try to knock that one on down just a little. And it is ready to weld. Oh, look, my spot broke. That wasn't nice. Should put a little bit more in the spot, shouldn't I? All right. There we go. Now, stay. All right. So I'm gonna roll you up here and make it nice and easy to work on, like being in shop class. side. Here comes the other. Just about what we call beautiful. A little bit here on this end, right there. All right, that rubber's starting to transfer heat. I hear it sizzling. Okay. All right, so it's starting to cook that rubber just a little bit around there. There's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. If you took and got the rubber out of one of these, you could put one in that was just the sleeve and, you know, to use as a support. No rubber, you wouldn't have to worry about burning, any kind of smoke, nothing like that. That would be a really smart way to do it. Now, as far as me getting this out and everything, there are tools, there are, you know, bushing presses just for this stuff. I don't own all those tools and everything, so I just get by with what I've got and everything. But, you know, just to be fair, there are the right tools to do this, and they're probably worth investing in and everything. Just can't have everything for every small, you know, item it is. The tools I've got, figure out how to make it work. So I apologize for that. It's just being very honest about what I do and how I do it. All right, so what I've got here, I've got a piece of 1 3/4 roll cage tubing, because that's 1 3/4, but I'm gonna have to clean that rubber off before I can do this, because that rubber is just gonna get in the way. So, I think I should be able to drive it off better now. I was just getting that rubber where it wouldn't be catching the rubber instead of the steel. There it went. Because I had just welded this up, all of this steel right here is warmed up, and so it was getting larger than what the bushing was. And so, you know, using a piece, you know, this is sitting in here, and you know, when I was using a piece of 1 3/4 pipe, it just drove the bushing out because it caught it right on that lip, you know, to let it do it. But these things can really be stuck in here, and so it might be worth it, you know, especially if you suspect you're really going to have a lot of trouble, is to go ahead and get a bushing press for it and everything. This is just a quick way. So now that we've got this out, all I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a flat disc, I'm going to clean this up, make this all pretty for paint. I've already done, here's my other one, so you just see what I'm doing here, because what I'm doing is I'm just giving it some support around this outside lip. That's it, that's all we're doing. So yeah, I'm gonna warm up the end with a torch, not cherry red, I'm just gonna warm it up. I've got my bushings in the freezer, so let's put one in. I'm not looking to get this cherry red, I just want it to be warm. By warm, I mean, don't get me wrong, not like I'd be comfortable putting my hands all over it, but, you know, warm. 300 or 400 degrees. You can throw it in the oven. You know, bushing in the freezer and the outside piece in the oven, and guarantee it would slide just slide right together. Okay. That's plenty. Grab a bushing. Right. So as you can see, we got us a bushing, good and frosted up here. We're just gonna take, I got an old sleeve I can sit over the top of it and get her drove on home. Yep, that's good. All right, and so you can see here, flange down on one side, it's gonna stick through just a little bit on the other. And of course, it's gonna sit there and equalize on temperature, and it's gonna be seized up tight. All right, so that's all we're doing. Now, let's talk about these lower control arms. You know, really the only difference here is the way we're gonna do these ends. super simple. Just using 2 coupons instead of 1, and it's not a problem at all. Show you here. I'm gonna line it up, and then we'll do the same process. We'll put a little spot on it to hold it in place. Okay. And then we'll turn around and flip her up here. Sit right there. Then we'll take the other one and we'll just lay it right here like this. Get a little pair of pliers to hold that. And we'll hold it right there in place. Yep. Alright, so check it out. So you see here why that I went with 2 pieces on this end here. It's curved over the top just a little bit here, so we got that. And then that's a straight piece. And that's a real sharp corner right there. It worked better with 2 pieces than it would have just with 1. You could have used 1. It just, when I beat that down, it would have been different. Every one of them I did would have looked differently. And so anyway, so I opted to do it this way with 2. So next steps for this lower, same deal here. I'm going to weld it up solid on both sides all the way around, and while it's good and warm, that's going to loosen that hole up. I'll go ahead and drive that bushing out, and then after I've got both ends ready to go and everything, I'll warm it up with a torch the same way, take a new bushing out of the freezer, drive it home, get both ends done, it's ready for paint. No filler down through here. This is a big beefy control arm. If it's that bad, I want this to fail, not something else. Really hope you're liking how we're doing here. This is real quick videos right now, and follow the street stock build playlist because there's a lot of quick videos that are going to be coming where as we assemble this car, we're going to be doing like 10 and 15 minute videos to show putting the rear end in, putting the third member in, assembling front, lower control arm and upper control arm with a spindle and everything. We're going to cut all that up and make some short videos. That way when people in the future need to reference something, want to see how we did it, they'll jump back to it. Don't have to go through a lot of long videos and everything. But with these short videos like this, definitely helps to hit the thumbs up, leave me a comment, let these things get traction, get them out there so that people can see them. It may be just what they need on their build to find a piece of information. Sure appreciate y'all. See you next time.